truly soggy crickets today. It might be all a good thing, but again, that last cricket would be nice. Really would be nice, wouldn't it? Think about that. Do anybody think about that? We have crickets to not be, and the last cricket, we'd wonder what we all be looking at that one cricket. What the heck? Where you been? How can you continue to be? But that would be interesting as well. Why would that be a problem? It would just show that there was still going to be a remainder of apathy, a remainder of cluelessness. And we'd have to, again, remind ourselves that it's an ongoing vigilance. We keep being told we have to maintain because the world is just not that sweet place that we would like to think it is. And I don't know what more to say about that reality. It's been a real disappointment to me, actually. I really am just this little guy in the world thinking it was all cool. And I've been what can I say, captured in this war against us. I've been captured by the fact that how badly it wasn't. And how badly those that are around us don't want it to be better either. Well, they claim they want it better, but it's all based on these other philosophies that you and I may not have agreed to, or even had a discussion over. And then systems were put in place to presume upon you a servitude. In some regard, and this is where over the time, I guess this is the thing that people miss on the internet generally. There are certain realities in the world that why we got here. I don't mean the negative parts. I mean there's certain things that happen that are constructs that have to be maintained if we tend and intend to move to the better place, and not allowed by the minority of people to move us to the better place. The reality is we are that herd they keep talking about, and we keep proving it, don't we? I mean, you have to be honest about that. I don't know what else to say. We are that. I don't like that, but that's what we are. In fact, I wouldn't mind being back in a nice, it's in our mind. It's all, well, we get to eat nice green spring grass and nice comfortable temperatures, and everything's taken care of, and we got the little sheepdog out there looking out for us, and the farmer's going to take care of us, and a rancher's going to take care of us. Yeah, that's real nice, but that's not the world. That is a reality of the world, but that's not, I don't think, the one that I want to live. And I suppose you can say you don't want to live that either. I'm talking critically to us, those that listen behind Woodshed and really understand this better, but just haven't stepped quite up into engaging this thing. That really is up to us to stop. That someone else wants to make a herd out of us. I don't know really. I wish I could stop right there. My mind just says I want to stop. I want to stop talking. I want to stop talking, not because I just gave up, because sometimes that's in your mind. In fact, that's a pressing problem for me a lot, and more. Just stop talking. You've said enough. You've got enough records. If nobody has seen it now, there's really nothing more to be said, actually. It really can be all stated pretty simply. And unless we all step up, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's going to go where it's going to go. And it's going to go there anyway, but I'm talking about with respect to what you think. You can complain all you want. You can fight and argue and rant and rave and fight each other in the chats and whatever all. I don't know. It saddens me just to watch that. It just proves that it just gives me more evidence. It's just not going to happen. And despite that, I come again and I sit for a couple hours, and then a couple hours after the broadcast to tell you and inform you. For those few that are really engaged, that's really all, I guess, all I'm talking to, and then the future. And thank you, Vin and Z in the RLM chat for the encouragement. I've just got to keep going, and people are just going to have to catch up, I suppose, and that's I guess fair enough. Not that I've ever thought I was ahead of anybody. I think I'm going backwards, and not in a bad way. I'm going back to things that people want to destroy today, even the good meaning people today, even the people that think they're so-called liberty-minded is the first problem. Remember, liberty was something, it's like an investment of what you get, not has nothing to do with your determination, actually. Now, there is, on the other hand, a liberty that you put yourself under to have a more peaceful existence. Why? Because the world's really unpeaceful. And at that point, I don't have a problem with the government that, in the best sense, the we the people make and agree to. And for me, I have an evidence. If no one else has the evidence and can see it, for me, I certainly do. And it was in the mining districts. Were they perfect? Well, absolutely no. There's nothing man and woman will do that's perfect. That's out. But we can get close to what we can all agree on. And a mining district was really, really interesting. It gives me, looking back, the example of what government really was. And it was people that were participants, the leaders of which were really directors of meetings and keepers of records. That's it. And the assembly, the participants, made the decisions. So this is not a government. The way I can see that it actually starts to work very well is not a sideline job. It's a participant job. It's because if you don't do it yourself, you don't roll there is no leader. If you give yourself over to a leader, you become the bait that they're going to stick on the end of the hook, or you become what the chum that they throw in, or that you become the school from which that fish herd from which they pluck you out and beat you in the head, club you in the head. You have to be the fisherman and fisherwoman. You have to be the one that goes out and is the example to bring more people to what you're doing, which is a participation. So this is not my determination. This is something that I think the actual reality, the thing that most everybody wants to evade. It's an evasion because we have an obligation to ourselves, I think, in the first instance. It's an evasion of our real responsibility. And that we are looking everywhere we find a corruption and adulteration. That's a reflection to us, folks. It's just us. That's a part of us. That's why I keep saying you point fingers out. You really learn to see the three pointing back. That's just a fact. And I tend to, and I guess I'm feeling a little frustrated again about the lack of embrace of those facts, these things I've just been kind of breaking down. It's not my making, and I don't come to talk to you in some lofty place. I'm actually, really, in my mind, I'm coming from a low spot. I'm coming from the realization that we just didn't do it, and we have a lot to do, and there's really no complaining to have. If you have complaints, you're not. That's not the example. Quit whining. I mean, this is on us. And I see greater stuff, much greater stuff, certainly better than we've allowed upon us. I mean, that's. Maybe it's me. Maybe I just see it. Maybe that's not in a lot of people. Maybe it's certainly not in all the people that don't continue to tune in or get again. And I'm going to be a little critical here of my own listeners. I asked last week, give me some guidance here, and I got zero. Now I understand, and I'm not taking a big old judgment one way or the other. In that I would like to see some guidance if there is to be had. But I got two ways to look at it. Either no one's listening. You're tuning in and you like to hear what you hear, and you like to hear what my insights are because you see them reflect in the world as a potential that's doable. I hate the word doable, but there it is, doable. I said it. It's something you can do. Or you don't want to participate. I don't know. And there's not much to be guiding me. Or I'm on the other end, like Vince says. I'm just working out my own path, and I happen to be ahead, if you will, on that path than most people, even those that would discount what I'm saying because they thought they'd been there. I guarantee you, folks, that what I've seen, no one's been here. It's where we haven't been yet. And the problem is it's covered over by all the chaos and corruption and what didn't work. And so, as I think about it, I'm way off my tab. Just, again, folks, I make a whole bunch of stuff, and I've got so much to talk about, and then I get, right before the broadcast, I think my mind gets flushed out because I got so many little things to click and do that I get a whole new thought instantly. And so, onto the important information. We're going to do some cleaning up here, I think, or adjusting. I don't know much about all this. So this information I'm going to bring here, this real quick here information, I actually don't know a lot about anything. I just tell you what my observations are, as applied to things of history and things of actual workings and not outside of my opinion. But this is stuff I don't really know because I'm not that connected to a lot of places to really to get the information. And so excuse me if I have some errors, but we're having some adjustments that are going on, and apparently, for those of you that are probably involved, probably already know, World Truth is going to be, as they say in the message, go dark. And so World Truth, there was something happen. I noticed something. I asked a question in the RLM chat, RealLibertyMedia.com chat, last week of something that was coming down. I didn't quite understand it. It really confuses me a bit on what's going on in social media. I'm not really a socialite that way. But I noticed some things coming down, and apparently they flared up right after the Sunday, and I hadn't been back. I've been really kind of overwhelmed and busy. I just dropped in on Monday and then didn't go back in to look at all. But there's been some problems, and there wasn't an agreement. There was tried to be some amelioration of certain things, but there was other people that didn't want that to happen, and then the one who had to foot the bill and put up with it decided they weren't going to put up with it anymore. So WT is going dark. It's going to go down. I don't know what the whole deal is. In that regard, then Bo Diddy stepped up, the guy who does the music, the blues during the week on RLM. He stepped up and he started another broadcast platform, a forum platform called, what was it? Darn it. I knew I was going to do this. All these things in my mind to say. Maybe the chat rooms. I'm sorry. There was a hyphen in it. That's what got me. Oh, no, there's not a hyphen. There's a hyphen in the other one. There's a couple of different places I guess we get to go, which I don't know. It's so much to go and do, but the new place to go instead of the WT is going to be Freedom's Network. That's right. I couldn't think of that. I don't know why. Again, it's all new. Freedom's Network. It's all one word. freedomsnetwork.com. You can sign up there. I'm posting there now as well. World Truth will be going for a few more weeks, I think. We'll be doing there. And then it got too much. It's kind of like Oracle Broadcasting. And that's where I'm sad. The fact you look around and nothing's permanent, and yet you're not going to have anything stable either, and that's a chaos that's not conducive to unified action, independent unified action. You're always looking for the next place to be talking to each other, and then those people that go in there, and this is the problem with some of the chats and why I don't really respond in the chats. Context is so important, and emotion and being able to discuss that. I don't really get into that so well. I know I have a real problem with, I'll have to watch chats a long time to try and get somehow somewhere with it, and I just don't quite understand it. So I don't engage the chats so much unless I can find a thread that I can understand. I don't really get into that. But so this is what happens, and things get destroyed and changed, and people have their reasons, and a lot of the function of these websites is put on one or two people to accomplish, certainly just one who has to be the liability to make decisions. And so there was a problem apparently. Now World Truth is going to go down. Up springs another one, and there's another couple, and I'm not going to I'm not going to advertise those at this point. I'm understanding we might be actually being picked up by another couple of social networks. So it could come out, more people can hear the broadcast, but as far as a unified place, it becomes it's like the mole. To me, it's the reverse of the moles popping their head up to try and find a cohesive place to work from. It's not so easy, and this is just indicative of what we're up against, that people, I think, discount. That I come every week to try and tell you this is not so easy, and we're going to have to work through these a lot better. We're going to have to be a lot more unified. And anybody that's coming in, and as I tell you, they're not, I guess it's fine to chat amongst each other, and I think it's important that we chat. But in my perspective, there's really not a lot to chat about when your future, in the near future, is being really changed beyond your ability to keep up, changed beyond your ability to control it because you chatted rather than you got engaged. And this is critical. So I guess to me, I'm focused more today on the fact that, I'm focused now on it, the fact that we just aren't integrated, and it's causing it causes division, and it causes misunderstanding. So we got freedomsnetwork.com. That's the social network where you can sign up now instead of WT, which is going to go down. I've also found out that I wasn't, and didn't know why. And I'm not that integrated, but I happened to be looking. I was looking for some information that I put out for myself that I couldn't remember. I did. I was trying to find it on the internet, and ran across the fact that I wasn't any longer listed with TalkStream Live, and so I got in communication with the management there and worked out the fact to get relisted. There was a misunderstanding on the content that I provide, apparently. And so we got that worked out. I'm back over on listed. Not that it means anything. It's not like I'm going to be in the top 5 like I used to be. But at least we got another directory to direct people to the broadcast. So TalkStream Live has been gracious enough to put us on the list, and I haven't looked into that too much more actually to know how it's working, how we're listed and all. But there we are. We got more. What little bit I do, I was able to find by accident that we weren't listed there. We were when I was at Oracle, and now we are again. And so it's more places for people to find the broadcast in case you're looking as someone who wants to promote the broadcast. I mean, this is the whole thing that I can kind of see to do. Just keep plugging away. So there's changes going on. Everything that apparently happened with the broadcast and the servers and all that. And I'm not sure again with World Truth and how it transitions. I think it's all being deftly handled. We're not going to have any interruption there. So all of your that's not in jeopardy that I can understand. In fact, it's being added to by going to Freedom's Network, and then we might have a couple more that are picking up the feed, in which the feed is just simply the Shoutcast server that whoever donated to that's going to be. It's still the, we're still booming to the world here. So here I am again, despite this, and we're just going to keep plugging away. And I'm asking us to really consider what we do, and I'm not trying to limit anybody's dialogue. Certainly we need breaks. Certainly we need to see new stuff, but to get in and be contentious with each other for really no higher purpose than the real purpose that we're being invaded or have been invaded, that's really seems to be, just logically seems to be not working, not workable. Why would you fight amongst yourself when you have someone that's going to take you both out? That's never made any sense to me, and I don't know. A lot of people want to throw their hands up and say, well, I'm doing what I do, and that's fine. And that's fine. This is all we make our decisions. But if we certainly, and I guess I don't understand it because I have such a passion to make sure this is getting a lot better than what I've found out, a lot better than the insult that I perceive. I don't have anybody to pass this on. It's my friends who have sons and daughters to pass this on to. It's you who have sons and daughters to pass on. I don't know why I would have more passion to move this thing into a better place than you all would who have sons and daughters. This is what, if we don't get active, we're leaving the problem to them for sure. Thank you, Vinzi and RLM Chat, for posting the TalkStream Live. It's just a listing in there, but it's just interesting, just something I ran across. I'd been listed before. We did really well. That's when we had lots of people seeing the broadcast, so I just thought, well, maybe we'll throw that in there again. So, yeah, and thank you for all the help that those that helped to promote the broadcast. I can't, thank you more. I don't do the YouTube, so the UCY, Jules, and then the setting up of the account for Behind the Woodshed on UCY. I don't have a communication, except now because of that work helping out, I now have at least I can't access, but I can see who and what. And we don't get many comment. We don't have many viewers there, but few. It's a handful more that get to listen, and apparently repeatedly. And I thank you very much for all that. But I also now get to see some comments. They don't want to send an email. markonthebeast@yahoo.com. And thank you, Gary L. I noticed that you say the information's fine, but I'm just looking to. I realize that, and that's the part I take. But it's harsh a bit to not hear feedback. Even what do you say? What I say? Guidance, just an off guidance. But I was able to find that over at the YouTube, UCY YouTube, and one commenter said something about me wishing that I talked more about the nuclear harm and things like that. And it just so happens, not that I'm going to talk about it in the way they were talking, because I'm on the record to show you that the nuclear harm is worse. It isn't Fukushima, and I think that's what they were wanting me to talk to. But it's worse. And what I've been online, and so this comes as we move in. I'll start moving into the tabs now for the content to tell us the nose is the notice to you, and we can see right through it if we want, and we can use it to put behind us. We can use it to see the stage the show, the reality show that our life has become, because we've allowed it to go there and we don't constrain it to where it's supposed to be. And what I try to bring is the remedies, some remedies, not a lot, I don't know, everybody's case is different, but I speak to how you can stop a lot of this. And let me get back over quickly. I think it was Alex on Ron's broadcast, Game On. Again, he's bringing up excellent information. You've heard me talk a lot about that. He's showing you in context of this Agenda 21 or the sustainable development and these communities and such. He's bringing up absolutely important information. But the guy Alex is talking about going to meetings where they're keeping all the information from the public. Well, Alex has the opportunity to be the first one in. And I'm not saying that when he does this, it's going to fix anything, because you'll find out nobody shows up anyway for the most part. But it does expose, given there's supposed to be public meetings with public notice, he's in the right position to move in a mandamus, if you have that up in the North Canuckistan up there. You have a mandamus you can move, and I think the English law pervades all of this. So I think I'm going to use it. I'm just going to talk from that. I don't know. I haven't researched Canadian law. It's just so much to research what I've been doing in the United States. They denied. They jumped from England, and we still carry over the implementers of the code that they brought. I mean, and none of it was really applicable to us when you get over to our land law. And so there's a big problem to start with. But I'm going to say that I'm going to assume that there's the writs are available, and the writ of mandamus, you can mandate that board, Alex is in the right position to not talk about it, and young enough, I understand now, which is great. I can't tell you how fantastic that sounded. That people with eyes to see now and seeing it and hearing it are young. That's wow. That's a big deal. And with the knowledge that maybe Ron can impart, and the speed with which someone like Alex can come on, those meetings that are supposed to have public notoriety, notice, those can be sued to make sure that it happens, whether or not anybody follows suit. But you can be the one to show the example of how that works. So that was just one thing that occurred to me about that. That here I can, and that's like a little part I throw in. If you didn't know, there's probably a writ you can use to mandate that the law be followed. And you're going to be up against that same corruption, but the fact is you're becoming the example of that the corruption is there, and it can be overpowered. It can be overdone to at least regain what at least the black and white says, even as corrupted as the black and white might be. Because I'm learning you can actually go before we attack that even. The prohibition against the Quo Warranto that I found in the state that I was moving in action for a friend, I attacked the action that they said replaced the Quo Warranto as being insufficient. So it gives you the in to go after these people. It's a little more technical, but it's not much more than what they told us. Well, after the 70s, you might start having a little bit of problem. But before the 70s, they told us how to make real sophisticated book reports, and that's all these legal briefs end up being. But I'm saying confine them to your subject matter. So we have a lot to do. It's on us, for as harsh as that sounds for people who don't want to, and I know it doesn't please me whatsoever to have to tell you that. I don't like it. There's a whole other life I wanted to live. And you say, well, go do what you want. No, it's not that easy, because eventually that's taken from you. It's taken from you. And people don't appreciate this. It's so subtle how they're doing that. And so this is how the incrementalism works against our perception. It's like kind of watching time pass. The time passes, but you never see a hand one move. Oh, maybe the second hand. Well, you think you're watching that little hand, even the minute hand move, but you're really not watching it move. It's moving so slow. It's underneath your perception. There's lots of examples about this. And so it doesn't help to wait either, because those perceptions get dulled, as I'm finding. I think most of you all have understood about that. We don't get better as far as the sensory capacities, right? And then life becomes, our half-life is working against us, right? And so the world goes twice as fast all of a sudden. Can't keep up. Well, you keep up with what you can keep up with. You realize there's a whole lot less you're keeping up with. There's a whole lot that flies past us. In the clueless, that's okay, because they're clueless. But for those of us that are starting to look around and find problems, you realize how fast the problems are going incrementally, how slow time does move, and it moves every moment. It moves on. That's even the invention that man has. It's there. You didn't make a calendar because we wanted to live peaceful. We made a calendar so that allowed someone else to plunder you on time. And so there's these good things and bad things about it all. And we have to find that middle part, I would hope. Not sure where anybody comes down on that. But so we have perceptions. We're told, I told you the news tells us things. It tells you that you finally realize that once you're told stuff, wow, look, that's been around for a long time. As Ron was also finding out, he says that sustainable development, I think he was a term developed back in 1915. And Ron, if you're listening, I'd like to have, not looking at any of the chats, but if you can send me an email, markonthebeast@yahoo.com on that source, because that would be very interesting to see that these concepts are not new. I saw not necessarily sustainable development, but it was the conservation movement, which ends up being what the rudiments of today's ecology movement was back happening around the turn of the 1900s. Conservation, though, then had a different meaning even so. And it respected the law a lot better than it does today, which is today conservation is non-use. And so you see that reflected pretty clearly in these conservation conditions and the non-use of the productiveness of the land and the fullness of it in these plans. So really consistent stuff. As I say, you can listen to Ron talk about it again. He reminds me a bit of William Roberts, except that Ron doesn't read out of an encyclopedia. He tells you the basics and focus on this thing that's on us, sustainable development. What we sued as a mining district, what we sued in 2013, and again, exactly what Ron is saying. Woe unto you, lawyers. I think if I heard that right, and I didn't hear the dialogue about it. I didn't pick it up. I think that's a 1939 document, if I'm getting the right title. And the professor comes out and just tells you the fraud that lawyers are. And again, back to the mining districts. The mining districts threw out all attorneys. All lawyers were thrown out of their camps. They knew. And so I'm kind of coming again, looking back, the memory. There was good things that happened back when that we should not throw out. We have to maintain where we've been. That's why everybody that today wants you to look forward to the new normal. It's the new normal as they've defined it. You need to get a foundation in your life, folks. You can't work on the new normal. It's all hypothetical. It's all the it's someone's fairy tale. It's the future we want, and you ain't we. You is you. Or by whatever name you call yourself, which has then also been stolen from you. And I try to bring you the ideas on how to distance yourself from that. It's not easy, folks. It's a big prison planet is not a joke. Even though I don't like the constant message that's not really helpful, except to maybe it did wake up a lot of people. But when you go from cluelessness, it's not real hard to be woke up when someone shock jocks you into something. But now what are you going to do? And I think behind the woodshed here, we learn those principles and what it is, even if it's not the most of it. I don't know where you're getting this stuff anywhere else in the way I'm suggesting it. And then I also have the problem I'm realizing. I have realized it. It's not there's a communication gap. And part of that is just not getting that black and white. It's all important black and white in your eyes. It's like I listened to Ron, and the only difference, it may be a distinction of some of the terminology. When he reads the black and white, we both have to agree. There's nothing that we can say different. Someone else said this is the way they're going to do it. That's the way it's going to be done. There's no sense for us to make up anything else now. And that's the unifying effect of what I call the black and white, this thing we call law. Whatever statute, whatever it is, they'll deem it as law. It can be law if it's legal, but is it then you as a man or woman look at it as immoral, and then that's where the line gets drawn. The narrow path is the moral application, and if you have a moral being, you're a moral being. That's going to eliminate most of the world around you. So these are truisms, I guess I can say. Even though in the war of the ism war against isms, true-ish, it's truistic. So we have stuff fly right by us, and here and in the news we get all this notice that things fly right by us, and what they've been telling us is long before what we ever thought about. Like I was pointing out Ron's 1915 definition of wherever, I didn't hear where he found it, the sustainable development back in 1915. This stuff has been here forever. I tell you, what we're dealing with is not just the last 30 years. It's been going for hundreds of years, if not millennia itself. A long time. There's been a spirit in this world that just doesn't give up. It's not of us, those of us that want a better day. It's of those that are opportunists, and worse, criminal opportunists on top of that. So we're told, we're coming into the day, we've been told, when I hit my broadcast, I was explaining a lot of this stuff. Didn't do any research, probably between, or after 2000. It wasn't anything new coming out. It was just after 2001, like I said, they went and done it. I went into different mode. I didn't do research anymore. I realized what I knew was enough because it told me that. And so it was more about trying to help people to understand what they were up against and moving better up against this new normal, this new fabricated crime against us. So here we have the news hits this last week, and it's not a surprise. All I'm trying to tell you here is I'm going to talk about this in the context is it happened before we were actually understanding it was happening, even though they told us after it was happening. That we could figure out it's happening, and we could actually, intelligent people will figure this out also. We can actually see before the news, all right? We can actually know before. We kind of deny that in ourselves, and then we get beat down by those of us that are either have an agenda or clueless or just don't want to bring up anything that makes them want to go do something. That's the other thing. Oh, I don't want to hear it because I may have to have a principle in me that has to respond. So if I don't hear about it, then I'm okay. But war zone tactics come home, or that could be your tax home, folks, because a home is defined as a tax home. Everything's in commerce. Even these ads, yeah, they're ads. The headlines of people that are writing across the world, they all use the proper, it's always amazing to me, they use the proper terminology for the military condition that's against them, and they don't even know they're doing it. It's a military economic condition of the globe, the global order. It's right here. The underpinnings, I've been telling you forever, the underpinnings of all these things you see as sustainable development is an economic servitude. So, the home is a tax home. It's always been here. But the title, War Zone Tactics Come Home as Pentagon Admits Domestic Spy Drone Use. The appetite to use surveillance drones in domestic environment, in the domestic environment. See, I kick on these after reading the black and white. I can't even stop. I have to stop and I read these things. It's a whole different thing. Domestic environment types into NEPA, folks. NEPA, if there's a domestic environment, you have to put this and factor this into the calculations of how things are supposed to be and what they're working on, so you get a better understanding of the reality you're up against. You also have an understanding of how to get at this stuff. That's the interesting two-edged sword of the black and white, and understanding the proper application of things instead of what you really find. I find it's really more and more terrible stuff on the internet. Fascinating sources if you can get the right ones, but terrible communication among people. And then they would come at me and well, they don't. Nobody really comes after me in my opinion, because it's not opinion. They won't talk to me. That's the other thing. But when you do have a dialogue, it's always wanting to be defensive instead of trying to be exploratory. And I say that in being nice about the fact that when I look at something and the black and white says contrary to someone's opinion, I've got to try and point that out somehow. I don't know if I do such a good job, but I try to point out the more proper reality that the folks that are up against us are using. But war zone tactics come home as Pentagon admits domestic spy drone use, and we all say no duh. We knew that, but we knew that. I was reporting about it, but I only reported on it after the inklings were coming out. But here is the important part. This is before I was even broadcasting. That this has been being done. Battlefield America just didn't happen in 2013 or whatever we heard about it. It has been going on since literally before 2001, but this has been part of the plan. So shows you how fast and how far ahead they are on us. Here we are getting the intelligence of this 10 years after they were doing it. They've been doing drone flights since 2006. Battlefield America was 2006 to 2015 that they got a Freedom of Information Act that shows that the Pentagon has flying surveillance missions. And they try to soften this up, and they try to say, oh, this is civilian operations and it's not military, but they actually come up in the end of this little ad. I keep calling it an ad. These are ads. These really are. These are propaganda commercials to us. We can buy into them if we want. Butter's better than what? We don't do that question. We need to do that question, even on this. But this is the questions I ask. They talk about there was no civilian, no military operations. Yet when you go read through the article, you find out that they actually had a question put before the Pentagon for civilian activity, which the one mayor wanted to have this multi-million-dollar aircraft search over his town to point out where all the potholes in town was. And the opinion of the Pentagon in denial was that wouldn't serve a tactical purpose. That wouldn't serve a military operations purpose. So these were not based on civilian purposes. These were always, despite the denial of the Pentagon, these are military operations in flight. And they want more. And they want more a lot. And so we read inside these documents, and I just post the links in a little bit ahead. Remember, when I post on the Blogcaster, folks, and those of you on Spreaker, don't hesitate to hit the content button over there, the link in the bottom left of your Spreaker account, or the page, and you get to the content. You can go read this for yourself. That you put two and two together. ACLU is all over this, saying, oh, they've analyzed it. This is legal. But they don't tell you the standard they use. They're happy that this is legal. Well, that may not be law, that's for sure, right? And then you have Battlefield America. They look right past that. Right past that. What's legal in a necessity of war, folks? Everything is legal. I tell you, but Lieber Code told me that. See, I bring the Lieber Code up not to even say that it's functioning anywhere, because they told us that was gone back in the memo for NDAA, remember? All this is just it's a facade. It's an ongoing facade. You can buy into it all if you want. And you have to buy in some reality. There is a reality, and it's just not the one that they've been telling you feed into. And you can say oh yeah, I understand it. Well, but there's a whole dynamic that sets up that you have to respond to if you just even recognize it. ACLU steps up, and I've never been a fan of these people. I found out a long time ago these people were not, these attorneys in this group were not going to help anybody underneath at least my perception of what law and application and right and justice was. So but anyway, they step up and try to give you the smooze. Oh, it's legal what they done. I look at it and say, well, what's not legal in a military conquest condition? I mean, you see this is like a joke. If you look at this, I mean, my view is I look at it objectively. How can it be civilian operations? Oh, and only 20, only a few of which they'll tell you what they were. They won't tell you what the worst. That should have been another clue when you read the article. They didn't tell you what all of them were. Why? If they were just civilian measures. But they wouldn't do an actual civilian purpose for as kind of menial as it sounds to look for potholes in town. But if it was really just looking at what the technology can do, why wasn't that just something to do? Why did they make that 21? They're using this as training purposes anyway. But here we are. We've been told in Battlefield America, it's been Battlefield America, folks. I told you that, extrapolated that after 2006, well after when I started my broadcast, that we lived in this condition of war. We have been. And we can point it out way back to 1917, Trading with the Enemy Act. One of the emergencies declared that envelops those things called citizens of the United States. And these are commerce entities when you look at them through this removal of the prohibition against you being an enemy combatant and their presumption that you are one of these. And again, this is a different status than the one I talk about that can be a grantee, so you got to keep track. But this is the one emergency, this war against the commerce of this nation that has maintained even through when they got rid of all necessities, war by necessities. They outlawed a whole bunch. I mean, they repealed a bunch. How do you repeal an emergency, folks? Shows you it's all made up. And they kept a few, and they made up some new ones after that. I think it was in the 40s, and then in the 70s and late 60s and 70s, they created new ones, right? New war on drugs, war on poverty, war. You don't realize that is what it says, and you don't live in law. And so there's a whole other reason why we don't live in law on top. Again, these categories. But here they tell you that these drones have been going on. Military has been doing it over the land that everyone thinks is supposed to be free and supposed to be free of this stuff and supposed to have laws that are supposed to deter it. This has been going on, Battlefield America, since before I've even been on the broadcast, before broadcasting. Folks, in 2001, they went and done it, I tell you. And it was predicted to us how they'd done it back almost 10 years before. And it was actually done before that and a few years before that when they explained how this thing was coming down. This was not, once you started to read, and this is about the time I'm coming in back then, starting to see this stuff and go, wow, this is a whole other way than what they've been talking about for sure. And then I realized that, wow, if you've got a memory longer than a match, you're gonna see this stuff come out again. Like I said, I think it was last week, these people, the future we want is not you. It's a minority of people. There's a lot of them, I got to tell you that, but compared to the rest of the people they affect, it's a minority. Talk about Minority Report. It's the future we want. It's their future. These people make plans. And I've said, I think it was last week, if you don't have one, you've lost. It's that simple. Or you're going to be pushed up against what we tried to do in the Civil War and we lost. And so that's your evidence of where we go with our so-called Second Amendment. It can't happen. My view, can't happen. You can't wait till then, because the more every day that goes by, you become less capable, don't you? And you get less empowered because your little pea shooter isn't going to go up against the technology they're bringing in that can hunt you down, like we found out, down to the inch now, because you're not smart enough not to have a phone or a license in your pocket that's got an antenna, radiating antenna. It's when you fold it out, it's probably bigger than the diameter of your body. Now your little Internet of Things all in your house, all beaming out where they are. Folks, it's right in front of us, and we are crickets to it. And I mean crickets into being able to deal with it. So, I can only hit a little bit, and I feel completely overwhelmed, realizing I start talking at the point of war. We're done at some level. And so little fractures between us and the chat rooms and all. I look at that and I say, wow. What else do I say? Wow. This is what's more important. And it must be. And that's not even a judgment. It's just an observation. I don't even know if I can do judgments anymore. We do what we will. I mean, this is it. We have our will. We choose what we choose. I can hope I can influence a bit of that. I can give you all the proof I can give. I can refer you to other people that appear to be bringing that same voice or that same message in a different voice. Again, I may not get to people so well. I certainly don't. Or maybe I do. And that's the other thing. Maybe I get to people so well, they're irritated. And they can't handle that irritation. And that's fair enough. But that's not going to help us. And I'm looking quickly up, and I'm so far off my tabs, folks, I'm not even looking at them. But I do have the chat room, one of the chat rooms up, and I see Gary L. put in Texas versus White. And that's a court case you need to look up. Pretty fascinating, about what happened during the Civil War. And how a really interesting decision, how they skirted a bunch of problems. They said, if we had to look at the license of the offices, then without looking at the license of the offices, we find this and that. When you see these opinions and decisions made like this, you realize they're skirting some pretty big international law. But the bottom line of it is, no matter what the status of these people were decided in Texas versus White, that you lost. That's the bottom line. See, that's the international law, the truth. That rooster does roost, definitely. And the people that went to guns and rebellion, as it was defined, even arguably correctly, had to flee their own country that they tried to make free. And so looking at these things, and Texas versus White is something I remember reading a long time ago. You start realizing the truth of what the real game was and is, and still on us when you see these drones. See, this Texas versus White is about rebellion in the Civil War time, as we're going into Civil War, and you see these drones. That's a connection, folks. You just don't get that. If you get that, you don't understand the importance, and that you have to you really have to put your mind in a different way of thinking. if we have any opportunity to throw off what occupies us, and I don't look at it as a conquest, otherwise we would, I think if the day I see it as a conquest, and it comes in waves of watching people fight amongst each other, can't get together, can't move together, want to be allowed themselves to be trolled, don't learn enough to know how not to be trolled, and I'm talking even by the government itself. Then I go through these days that maybe we are conquered. I think about it. Maybe we are conquered. I know, bow down to me, I'm not conquered until I'm gone. But realistically, you know, if no one else is fighting, then I'm going to have a bigger gang on me. It's part of what the big problem is. The least of us that are fighting, the more attention can be brought to us. As you saw them put themselves in like fish in a barrel in the Harney County thing. That's just was the wrong way to go about that. Even though they could have done the same thing a lot righter, they didn't even think that far ahead. And you just got to shake your head. But so, war on terror turns inward. NSA surveillance will be used against American citizens. This is written by somebody. How long ago did I tell you that, folks? How long ago did I say the guns were inwards? And then how long now do we sign before that was the fact, before they even told anybody? The Pentagon's all over this. Why? Well, because you live in a military gut world. It's been that way for probably ever, and we really didn't fully throw it off, and then it was perfected in the Civil War. And we have, if you go look at, what was that, Texas versus White. Thank you, Gary, for pulling that up. It reminded me about that when I saw that. I need to actually move this over here, so I'm not going to be looking there anymore. But when you look at Texas versus White, you should think between the lines. Because inside that explains how you do, or at least partially, how you set up to do what you all think you want to do, and how you want to change stuff. It explains right in there. It gives you an insight, at least. And that invasion, that rebellion, is actually happening on us. That if you took the rebellion of, let's say, sustainable development, applied it to Texas versus White, considered sustainable development to be Texas, the rebellion in Texas, and you are the Union that is represented by Washington, you will see how to attack this invasion, this secondary wave, or tertiary wave, or whatever. I mean, we have waves of occupation all over us. That I will tell you, as I was reading that case that Gary just posted on the Twitter, and when I started reading, I started to smile. A lot of the statements of which are really, I didn't realize this, but they were talking to our case in 2013. And so having the experience now of doing something like that, and putting these, just changing places, these usurpers and rebellious ones, we fit that definition of the condition of how it's supposed to be done, and the right with which it is to throw off the internal rebellion happening, and the obligation it was to throw off the internal rebellion, and as looked at through the decision of White, Texas versus White, the permanence of what we stood on. In other words, even as I've been saying to most people, no one wants to really look at what we did, and they think they can turn away from it. It's going to stand. And if I apply the principles of talked about in the international end of it, in Smith versus White, or Texas versus White, there is a permanence of what you can stand on. That's that narrow path I keep telling you. In other words, don't deny the past, the substantial past, the foundational past. You have to embrace it, and you'll see this in that case. You have to embrace the permanent. That was the good part, to identify the bad part, to throw it off. And essentially that's what our 2013 case did. We treated the insurrection in the offices of government as a rebellion. And it's pretty interesting. It was just pretty interesting to read that case as well, to be reminded that that's exactly what we did in 2013. And so I guess I'm saying there's a way to do it, but it wasn't because we just typed on our keyboards, or we chatted in a room, or we were involved with some social network, or we destroyed a social network because we were too hard-headed to really understand that there's certain social rules, if I can put it that way. There's just ways to get along that we just have to agree to. We have to be respectful. But why, at some level, why WT has now, other than I understand, it just gets too much. That's what happened at Oracle. It just got too much. Other than that, I didn't understand why the new rules weren't sufficient to boot out the trouble and maintain the cohesion. Not a judgment, just an observation, because I'm totally outside of all that was going on, and I do not displace what my opinion is on anybody's decision that way, because I know it's a lot of work. I've been there. But why the internal strife was more important than working that out and moving on is really indicative of our problem as people in our own country. How easy it is to start a division, and what these people that are in power are doing to foment division and to make it look like there's division even. But so this war has been on us, and it's been going on, flights over flights since 2006, long before I was even broadcasting. But when I came on in the first evidence, I told you that we're in Battlefield America. That hasn't been a problem. Here's how. I explained a lot of this before. I actually don't explain too much different. Maybe that's why people have heard it and move on. I don't know where they're moving to, because I don't hear all the action that we should be doing. But at any rate, they move on for some reason. And then we hear now the development of this, now that we're having surveillance, now they're going to give us the standard of who's surveilling and by what standard they're going to be using. And the next story pops out here this last week. Elites, that's elites, I call them, the evil lights. Elites, link anti-government thought to mental illness, lay groundwork for incarceration. So that was just you know all this. I guess part of the reason why I don't talk to you all behind the woodshed too much, and no one sends in an email that says it wasn't sufficient. These concepts, I think you already understand. I don't really have to talk about. You know the source of all this, and if you don't, you get on the internet. And I don't mean the source of the story. I'm talking about the source of this idea that so-called anti-government thought is mental illness. There's thought crimes. You know where all this starts coming from. You know the source, and people are probably more versed than I am in it. Once I just see it, I don't have to dig that much deeper. So I don't think I have to discuss too much more. I can get into someone's opinion and how they wrote and all this authorship. The headlines tell us, like in the fusion centers and anti-government thought, Orwellian stuff. It was coming, folks. Here it is. Here's the standard. When they're drone, they got that drone over you. When they start to use them more. Remember the GPS down to an inch now. We heard last month. Your thoughts, and you see all the advertisement of how much they can know, how monkeys can cause a human participant to think certain things now, or rats doing the same thing, that a human can make a rat's tail move through the brain. Folks, take the notes. It's here. Your thoughts are now crimes. The anti-government thought is to be a mental illness, lay groundwork for incarceration. Isn't new. That's exactly what they've been working for, but here's the standard right after they tell us they were doing it. And my question was, and I think I sent this out to Gary L. as well, does demonstrable elite organized crime masquerading as government lay the groundwork for incarceration or mental illness? So I guess my point here was for y'all, not to read these things and know, yeah, it's going on, was you take what they're doing and you get a word in your mouth about how to turn the frame of what they're doing to point them out as the problem. I'll read that one more time. Does demonstrable evil light, organized crime masquerading as government lay the groundwork for incarceration or mental illness? I ask questions, but they're really rhetorical, because once you understand that it does, you then are in the position to affect that enforcement. And if you understand what that says, then you're probably much farther ahead than most people to be the one to go ahead and impose that authority with authority of the law. And so you are empowered once you see this stuff. We don't take this lying down. They can go ahead and think, they can mischaracterize what you do as anti-government. You have to have the word in your mouth to say that it wasn't anti-government. It was, you're here, as we've already done this. You can cite, if you're new to go read it, 18 U.S.C. 4. No, it's my duty to call out felony what you just done. And if now the one I tell, if you don't bring it on, then you're in violation of another felony. 18 U.S.C. 3 is an accessory. You see, you don't fall into these ideas. They have a standard. They're misapplied. You got to change the framework from which you work with. If you don't, and I've been trying to bring this methodology to you, so in the near future, and maybe even as you have been, and going, you'll be able to realize that they can set the framework and you can deny it, but you have to have the ability to, in your mind, the words in your mind that are being written down, that they understand to respond with. If they're committing felony, does their claim of anti-government thought, is it valid? Can it even be a standard? Is something you have to be able to put in your mind. It comes to me pretty quickly a lot of times how to reframe more correctly in law what they're attempting to point the finger at you are doing. Anti-government thought. Wow, if you look at it from E-Light, what we did in 2013 was mental illness. But see, we turned the frame. We said, you don't have the right, you don't have the authority to put that definition on us. You don't have the authority to fabricate that definition. I don't even agree with the fact of your ability. And then I give you one, I'm going to be respectful of your ability. Maybe I am wrong. Show cause. Show cause how I'm wrong. And if you come back with a lie, I'm going to get you for 2 felonies. How's that? Now, this is talking in the abstract. Elites. That's abstract. Link government anti-thoughts. Like these people, I don't even know what you think. Elites. Are they there? No. I don't even agree with that. You're not an elite. You're evil light. That you can even think you say this is a crime against all of us. And you have to be having that ability to point that out pretty quickly. And it's not on and on. You don't hear me talking about the Constitution this and Article 1 this, that, and the other, and the Amendment this. No. These are just moral crimes right up front. It's like defamation of everyone's character here. There's no place that I've been able to find that gives anyone, under any color of authority, the right to impugn my character, my obligation. Remember, the character means obligation when you go back in the dictionary far enough. Your obligation. And what is that? Obligation is that you're not a criminal, I guess. If you want to live peacefully amongst people, you want to keep the peace. That's your obligation. So a lot of people that say, "Oh, I don't want to be part of that." No, you're going to have to be part of that somewhere else. You want to agree to be non-peaceful, and that's not a world I want to live with you in. And so you got to really lay these foundations for yourself and stick to them. And the least that function, the widest, the most comprehensive, the best. So you don't become your own liar. You don't get confused yourself. So the standards on us, they're going, again, the as innocuous as it sounds, the drones have been overhead in battlefield America all this time. Nothing new, but I wanted to point out this is exactly what you didn't know that they're telling us back when by what. Something I pointed out last week, a FOIA. You just ask them for it. Be real specific. They got real tight on how they do this. Be real specific. Throw in a waiver of fees because you might be actually becoming, you might expose a crime within the government, so they don't charge you the fees. So the other thing I don't understand with a lot of people, it's going to cost so much. Those of you that have ever gone into the courts and got PACE or tried to get the information off of PACER, I wrote a lawsuit, and I was party to a lawsuit, the files of which I can't even get because of PACER. Shows you there's no access to your courts. And I don't really whine about that, because I got, for my case, I only care about my case and the case of my the co-petitioner and the district co-petitioner. We got those paperwork. I don't care about anything more. But this shows you that you now don't have access to the records of your courts if you have to go through a private organization, public-private partnership, for this information. That shows you don't live in the country that they tell you live in. And so you have the ability to attack it if you want to, if you get disgruntled about not being able to see court cases and things, because they're going to charge you money. Because you got to be registered. Who's registering? You know it's going to be that corporate debtor entity. Try to do it without that. I mean, the whole system's wired. It's been. How long have you ever been talking to someone? Well, I write why do you put it all in caps? Why do you type in? It comes all in caps. I remember when I was real young, I'd ask, well, why do you type it all in caps? Because I just remember my grammar school said that not that everything's in all in caps. And the lady behind the little machine would just say, well, that's just what it does. It's all we can do is put it in caps. It's telling you that's a private system. It's a private designation. However, whatever it means. Same thing with not being able to access these courts. These courts files are going through a private system. They're not public in the general sense. They are public because they're government, but they're not public in your thought. So they're telling us all that we don't live in the reality that we've been told we live in, and we are crickets to that, and so it continues. Nobody challenges it, makes it an issue. As we've been learning to find out that the issues that are made for us and the ones that you find out that are publicized, because remember, you can't really once you get Pacer, even people on Pacer can't get the lawsuit we filed in 2013. They don't want that out. They don't want out to see what happened there. And so that's a reality to me. None of you, all you go look and you'll see the docket if you get that. And unless you sign up for Pacer and become registered, registration is confiscation, folks. Remember that. Doesn't matter. Doesn't apply to guns. Then we'll find the paperwork. You'll feel slighted. So there's a whole other reality going on right in front of us that we don't do. That these cases that we get anymore are really setup cases, and this is the one that ongoing from last week. Apple says FBI could force company to turn an iPhone and turn on iPhone cameras and microphones. Well, like that wasn't already probably going on anyway, and we haven't heard it from the school systems and all that kind of stuff. They put their little things. But this is more of that propaganda. See, Apple wiping its hands of something that they're already able to do. So this is coming. This is the future, folks. They're going to be doing this. And then, and thank you to Rome's over in RLM chat again. We were talking about the Linux, distribution, the platform of Linux, and something I didn't know. He tells me, and there's a link. I may put it in the blogcaster. I didn't link up to it. It goes right to NSA, and so I went there once on one browser. I probably won't go back, but I did get to read the Linux kernel as the security enhanced version, SE Linux, has got a backdoor in it. And if you go to the web page that Rome's provided for me last night, it tells you. The NSA will tell you there's a backdoor in Linux, and that's on about most all servers that use Red Hat Linux. And so the fix has been in, actually. So word to the wise, so those of you that are in thinking you're really anonymous, there is some protection, I guess, certainly in encryption and possibly the Tor, but folks, it's in the back of your systems. We looked at the same authentication group in the government that allowed SE Linux, allowed that Windows 10 for the DoD through NSA, and so they've been far ahead of us on all this. But here comes a story that it's for your consumption. That Apple's going to they're washing their hands of the fact that FBI could force the company to turn on iPhone cameras and microphones. That's funny. That's not a concern with Apple with any other third party. But it's in the news for us to see. And I say this is stuff we have to know the battlefield we're in, and I don't want anybody to think that that it's such a it's not harder than than I'm talking in a way, but that's because of an awareness. Once you get that awareness, it's still taxing, but it's not that hard. It's just a matter of keeping aware of the battlefield. They lay these little traps for us. They have been. This is nothing new again. It's just admitted, I guess, is the point here. It's confirmed. They're setting this one up. That they can do all these, they can do all this surveillance on you. They can take, and as I pointed out to you last week, they can fabricate identification, fingerprints on court cases from back 30 years back. The FBI is willing to do this. So these people are not above being criminals at all. They're not of a high mind here. Hive mind maybe for the Borg, but not a high mind, and not the 420 mind either. It would probably be a lot more peaceful at some level, I suppose, as I've been told. But the government uses a lot of technologies that are bogus, and I think it was might have been James Corbett that came up with this a few weeks ago. And so I'm going to link you over in the blogcaster to this. But bogus CSI technologies the government uses to con you is right here with what was right in sync. Again, all these tabs I've been wanting to speak about all this, but they just take the time to get to it. That all these things are sitting there to tell us what's going on. That is a problem. That if we can disregard it, but it's right here to tell us and give us evidence on how, when you get involved, they will apply this thing to thwart your activity. Again, to make you the thought criminal, to make you to attempt to incarcerate you. The worst incarceration of which really is the mental health incarceration. They used to do that. I haven't been in touch so much lately, but they used to do that pretty readily here in the last few years. As soon as you challenge the government, you'd be put on a mental hold just for challenging the government. So I looked at that and said, well, you got to come a lot more substantial. Again, focusing on the black and white helps to do this. That they can't say that when you can cite to a code that says they violated it, they're not going to be able to use that mental hold. That's another felony against you. You have to be able to say that. But they use bogus CSIs. See, the CSI, if I remember right, there was programs. They tried to pump up that these techniques were valid before the law. In fact, when you go look at rules of evidence for these techniques, they take a long time before they're actually taken up by the court as valid. And if you don't know that, then you get beat down by these bogus techniques. And this is a list of quite a few bogus techniques that you can use to understand that the government intends to harm you and how they harm you, and so that you can anticipate the show. You can anticipate the deception, the facade. I found it an interesting read. Again, not being that connected to all that, not knowing that, I can see if I ever got involved with something because they would want to come after me, not knowing some of those at least, would have been, and not being able to call them out as a fraudulent, bogus use, challenging the technique to strike some evidence, would have been very important, because if I didn't know it was there, I can't use it. I only can assert. The presumption is you're asserting all your rights. So if you don't assert the rights that you needed to, it's presumed that you waived it. So this whole thing is inverted to begin with. So this is a show. The CSI shows that the FBI has techniques, all kinds of them. So that you think, and we all think, are valid. In fact, they really are not. And you need to see that. You need to know that's in your mind. I think this information will help you out. It may not help you today because you're listening to me, but when you turn yourself into someone that gets picked up because not out of your choice, because you're the next sheep to be culled, or to be sheared first and then culled if you give them resistance. You need to have these kinds of things to work with, and I found that it does make a difference. It's really kind of preparing for the way you may go, because the way that you may go is coming to you. You're not going to be able to avoid these things. You can for a while, but one day you aren't. And so I'm hoping that this is all valid. What I'm saying is valid for you to consider, because I know we use this stuff. I use it to identify and go through this facade. A lot of false fronts in this spaghetti western. One more of which, and I didn't want to talk too much, but that's becoming such the sideshow. Or the reality TV show now. I've got to call it out. Again, I could care less about any of the candidates. I'm more concerned that people stop buying into the fraud that's being done with them. That's really a psyop in my mind. To me, it looks like a big, world wrestling match going on at one level, and then the reality game show at another. There was something that went on in Chicago rally with Trump, and there was this big old hassle that went on. And we only saw the pictures of the inside, what looked like there was tens of thousands of people wanting to listen for Trump, who then canceled because there was a known protest going on. Folks, the more I look at this thing, this is a plan to solidify the base of Trump. This was set up. What we didn't see is outside there was even more, thousands of protesters, and they outnumbered the people inside that were Trump supporters. So we have to me that was, it starts to show that this was a setup. And I don't know, I didn't ever think about this, but a long time ago, one of the big bad words that we were supposed to learn to spell just because it sounded like a big bad word, after supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, was Antidisestablishmentarianism. I think I can actually use that now, today, in a sentence. Antidisestablishmentarianism describes the Trump campaign in that it is anti-disestablishment through fraudulently appearing anti-establishment. I want you to keep track very carefully of this thing going on. I could not have predicted more accurately what's been going on. And then this other thing that came on, I only have a link to a Facebook account that I can't even see it. I saw a little bit of another video, but I know if one of my Twitter followers has this at WTFRLY.com. The title of this is When Rich Kid with Bully Friends Gets Older. It's about Trump. And he's making a speech with his big Trump jet in the back, and then all of a sudden there's this big to-do drama about someone coming over a fence to come. I guess the show is that he's going to come in to try and come at Trump. And so you see the Secret Service jump up around him and protect him and all this other stuff. That just reminded me of World Wrestling, where Trump turns around like he's going to go after the guy. He turns around and he actually goes in the direction of the guy. This all appears to be staged. It's all being done, it seems, when you look at this, to solidify Trump's base of being apparently anti-establishment when what he says is incongruent with other things he says. And what he says has some motivating power. I mean, I would really like to hear some of the things that he said actually work. Some other things are pretty heinous, actually. When you look at the lineage of what he's saying, and I'm not want to downbeat him because the rest are as bad or worse. These little indications show me these are all staged, and Trump is kind of in on this. He's playing to it as well. And in the campaign fiasco, rightfully so. I mean, this is what you do, right, when you're in politics. My response, though, so when you see the video, and you get the link in the Blogcaster, of this thing like Trump turns around from the podium to kind of run. He looks like maybe he's running, but he's running in the direction of the guy on the podium. He stays on the podium. He makes just a couple steps. But he acts like he's going to go after the guy coming at him, you know. I had to respond, the show, what we see here, the show just gets more realityistic, doesn't it? This is the reality show we're watching. It's nothing to be getting wrapped up in. Yet, when this happens, people are more drawn to this. And I wanted you to be aware of this dynamic. This is pretty fascinating, watching people being controlled, being able to predict it, watch it happen, and then watch the response, and it fits. It's almost like, I mean, this is all inert to me. I'm just watching how people respond, and they do. And that's a scary thing to watch, actually. So this guy Trump, he's saying some interesting things but he's also speaking to a certain people, like they all do. Again, this is not, I don't know what to say. I can keep saying I don't care. I care enough to tell you about the deception, I guess. And that's really all I really want to do, but I'm interested to hear what they say, because in what they say, they're telling you certain things. And I've been waiting to see what this guy Trump was going to say about the problem out west with land rights. He hasn't really talked about it. He starts talking about producing again and industrial jobs, but he doesn't talk about where the raw materials are going to come from. Well, he does apparently go, when he went to Nevada, he did talk about it. And he says U.S. need a president, us, the United States, needs a president who obeys rule of law. And, I don't know about rule of law. I think it's a big travesty. But let's go on what I think he's trying to convey, that there's a law and the executive has to follow it. Well, okay, but when you look at what Lincoln did, he declared a necessity and then it all went away. The necessity was such that no matter the rebellion in Texas was deemed to be non-existent for the purposes of cohesion, for the union, the perpetual union now, the thing you can't get out of. And why that's going to be the tail of the tape, and you better understand that. That's why speaking of secession's pretty lame at some level. It's just a waste of time. It's just another movement to waste your time. And I guess I say that with the experience in an injunction action, which only takes about 2 weeks. It's about a 14-day maneuver. We expose the whole criminality. The enforcement's a lot better. The mass moving is a lot harder to stop. An asteroid in space is a lot harder to stop than it is to just change direction. That's what we're dealing with. Political mass is the same way. An invasion of sorts is the same way. It has a mass. And so you have to be cognizant of the natural law you're up against. But it says the United States of America is a land of laws, and Americans value the rule of law above all. Why then has our Congress allowed the President and the executive branch to take on near dictatorial power? How is it that we have a president who will not enforce some laws and who encourages faceless, nameless bureaucrats to manage public lands as if the millions of acres were owned by agencies such as the Bureau of Land Management and the Department of Energy? In Nevada, the lack of enforcement of immigration laws and draconian rule of the BLM are damaging the economy, lowering the standard of living, and inhibiting natural economic growth. Not only the only way to change these circumstances is to bring to Washington a president who will rein in the federal government and get Washington to do its job. It's not that we don't have talented people in D.C., it's that we have no leadership there. Now, it goes on and talks about more. Folks, that's just declaring a condition. And that's exactly right, what he says right there. But not explaining more and putting the power in D.C. is really a diversion as well. The power is in the states, actually, and it's in the enactments. If you want to go by law, he shouldn't have referred to D.C. He should have referred to these enabling acts. Remember, he went from law to a place, a territory, a district, and the people inside. So, just wanting to point out, there's lots to talk about. I don't know if it's going to be important to much of anybody, except for those that it are, so I've got to kind of move on here. But there's a lot I read in this, and I'm particularly involved in this land use, property disposal stuff. So, it's just what doesn't get said is just, it screams to me that what you see is these people, all of them, they just talk to conditions. And you see the condition that they talk about as if they're going to do something about it, actually. And all they're doing is speaking to your aspirations that something be done. Firstly, you haven't listened to what they're really doing to you, because a candidate can't be held to whatever they say anyway, no matter how good it is and what his intentions or her intentions would be. But you're not also hearing the things that's not said that would be relevant, and certainly can't know it if we're all clueless to certain things. And I only have an insight because I've been focused on Western land disposal and the obligations for about a decade now of action against it. That's the only reason why I see this. It's like I don't see lots of other things I haven't been working on. And so this has got an insight to me that is particular to the failure of what's going on, and he goes back and resorts back to the same problem. Yes, we do need a president that follows the law, but how you're not going to get in the seat of decision that says, but we're under necessity, Mr. President. You are the law. Then you do whatever you need to. I ask you to think about that, folks, because this is really more the reality of what's going on. So what's this condition out west? How would the president be able to handle this? But what about the executive investigators, the FBI underneath, and the DOJ? Didn't say that he would tell his DOJ to now make right the trust between the federal government and these private property owners. He didn't declare how he was going to fix that, just that there needs to be a leader. Yeah, for another hook and some bait so they can hook you, one of the herd in the group from D.C. This guy is not really saying anything to me, but he sounds good. And Hitler sounds good, and the Burns sounds good. And yet, when you understand there's a whole other dynamic working, that when they get into the office, they're probably constrained to that, actually. And they're not creative. They're not knowledgeable enough to actually impose the law. I wish they would. The law is all there, folks. It's being absolutely ignored. And he thinks that he's got to go somebody in D.C. to do it. No, what needs to be, it's not in D.C. It's in every place, in every state. The law's not being recognized by the government employees. Not Washington, D.C. And when you complain about it, they send the FBI out. And they tamper with your evidence. They tamper with your witness. They intimidate you. They harass you. All in violation of the federal law. So So it's not out in D.C. that this has happened. This has happened where you are at, right where you is. And the FBI is used, as we heard last week with this Finicum, and the hostage thing. They still haven't declared a hostage why that FBI group was there. The hostage rescue team. Who was the hostage they were going to rescue? They killed this guy, but this has happened before. Assassination of Martin Luther King ruled in a court as a governmental conspiracy to kill. This was happened in a case a while back. Went underneath the radar of everybody, but they found out that the government set up Martin Luther King. Now, I'm on record about this Martin Luther King guy. He talked about the content of your character. He's talking about your obligation to the government. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. But I want to make sure that you know you have an obligation to the government. If you listen to exactly what he said, you realize this guy was no different than Lincoln or no different than Roosevelt. He came under the color of a religious leader as well. But the FBI takes him out. So why is it then not a problem? Why is it a surprise, as any of us who would realize and have read, that this Finicum execution wasn't exactly that? And we now get response from the family a bit. The evidence will shock the conscience. Lavoy Finicum's widow to file wrongful death suit, and there's a video here, you get the link, that in fact they are seeing the same things I was seeing and more and maybe less. The proof of the fact that the FBI was trying to take out Finicum is really relevant in one of the last videos you're now seeing that was given to us to see, for as adulterated as it all might be, from the FBI when they're trying to whitewash this thing, and she calls it a whitewash. It's a crime what's going on. You see, and I caught this myself about a day before someone had actually highlighted it, and I was really kind of just conversing with this problem, that while Finicum puts his hand up after supernaturally leaving the truck. I mean, if you count 3 seconds, he was in this truck, in his seat, and then outside of the truck standing by an open door while this big heavy truck door was on the upside of a snow slope. He jumps out. It takes him 3 seconds. And within a 4th second, he's got his hands up. And he's moving out away from the truck, certainly it looks like now, to draw fire. And right as he passes the window, or right at the middle of the window, that window that you're looking through gets blown out by a bullet. If I didn't do the analysis before on whether or not any part of that so-called traffic stop was lawful, you have to have a lawful stop. If none of it was a lawful stop, he had every right to do what he did. Absolutely. He had every right, even beyond that, to protect himself beyond a reasonable arrest force, which you see, they shoot at him. He was completely in his power to defend himself, for as unwise as that might have, you would think that would be. That we see the evidence of a gunshot, the bullet that the investigators of Deschutes County can't figure out where the 4th bullet came from. I'm not going to even worry about the number. Just that one alone, that they didn't know where it came from and they didn't do any more studies, is a problem. But that when you see what appears to be that bullet coming through the roof, going into right where Finicum is, but misses just a bit. It comes in and it goes and it shatters that glass while he has his hands up. Should be about all you need to know about where the shocking of the conscience begins. That's all up to each one of us, though. But they're going to be now moving. The FBI has executed someone else, just like they did and was proven with Martin Luther King. Again, I'm not putting judgment on anything I think about these people, is that this is supposed to be a government that was supposed to be ruled by constraint, and you don't. And if you don't appreciate that you live in a military world with military personnel, wherever they go, that's how they respond, you're going to misunderstand the condition. And I start thinking about it. I wish these people had a better realization about, what they're doing, because I think they would be alive today if they were. I'm not saying they wouldn't be any as arrested, but they wouldn't be, at least Finicum would not be dead. But Finicum may go down, he may have been the example, he may have been the hero to us in this regard, and he may be protected, given that there's a place to go from this world, apparently God-forsaken as it seems. He showed us something. And I want people to recognize that. Now, the court case may bring stuff out. I'm kind of concerned they're going to do a plea deal. I mean, not plea deal, but I mean, I'm reading plea, but a negotiated settlement. We may not ever hear all of this stuff. But the bottom line for me is if you can't see that the window goes out when he has his hands up and it was done by a bullet, and they're using lethal force here, you understand, or less than lethal is still lethal force. It's the surrogate. Less than lethal is the surrogate for the need to do lethal force, just less lethal to do make the reasonable claim that they did a reasonable arrest. The man's hands are up, and this window gets taken out. Remember, this is apparently through the roof. This is not like the dum-dum rounds they were shooting at the glass next to Shauna Cox that wouldn't break the window she was next to. And if it didn't come from the roof, it had to come from the uphill side, which means there was more people in the trees, wouldn't there? How it went through him, I don't know. But if he was shot then maybe you think while he's getting out, he's responding to the shot in his back. Well, he's got his hands up, and is now coming out that someone, as I identified and someone else identified for me, the guy to the right of the long shot, looking in the long video from the sky, shows some FBI guy come in at the same character of shot. Once Lavoy Finicum put his hands up, the shot rings out to the truck. Once Lavoy Finicum just breaches the back of the truck, the FBI guy takes a shot. Whether it's lethal or not, I can't tell, but he takes a shot. Lavoy Finicum responds to that if he's not responding to one that may have hit him before. They set this guy up. They did what they're now calling a dead man's block around the highway. You're not supposed to block the highway. So I could go on, and there's lots to observe. I'll let this play out. You need to know these people that are in the law enforcement and investigators of law are criminals. They will fabricate evidence. They will create characterizations and obligations on you that do not exist to justify their existence, and about every bit of it is a crime. It's not something, I know there's a crime. If there's a crime, we're duty-bound to arrest it, folks, wherever we be. Again, this nature of the military, the war, the battlefield America, more evidence, folks, is just to let it out, lay it out for you. Something you have to consider. Maybe not. Maybe you think you'll be hiding. It's coming. Judge denies bail to New Hampshire man for the Bundy, Nevada standoff. Judge, we talked a little bit about this. Judge has denied bail of a New Hampshire man accused of being a mid-level organizer in a high-profile 2014 armed standoff with federal agents. Hang on a second, folks. There you go. Okay. So this is Jerry DeLemus. Was ordered on Tuesday, remain jailed pending trial in connection with the standoff, which began when federal agents seized cattle at the ranch for unpaid grazing fees. I've told you that he had a consideration given to the surface property rights that were granted to the family under Taylor grazing. They have not been given consideration to this consideration, so the BLM is in major violation here. Whatever this is, they were supposed to do this by civil means, not by criminal and in courts of competent jurisdiction. That's not why I'm here. I'm showing you that this guy, who has a wife who's a representative in New Hampshire, she's an official, elected official in New Hampshire, will not be let out. I'm going to bring up the idea to you that this is NDAA. This is indefinite detention. Only they're given civil trial. They're given the appearance that it's not indefinite detention. You can't. He's not. It doesn't matter that he was a mid-level organizer. The standard is for release is whether or not you're a danger to society and whether or not you will run and not make your appearance. That's all it's supposed to be. This court, so-called, this judge in this trial, so-called, again, I would show you that if it's a United States District Court, this judge in the court has no competence. That's proven in our case. It's proven in other cases. It's proven you see a Lufkin case going on. It's been going on since 2015. I'm not sure why they're not doing a quo warranto to end this all, but there are cases all proving the same, that these USDC courts have no jurisdiction. The judge of this case, the judge so-called of this case, did not even accept the elected representative's testimony of her own husband to keep him in. So This to me evidences NDAA. Then you have to understand that when you're going in, because that's why I tell you you're going to need more than yourself, as I found out way back when, over 10 years ago. When you're in and you think you have allegiance with people too, they may not be the allegiance that you thought, and you may not get the help that you need. That when you're put in, and especially in solitary, they try to keep things from you, and they certainly were trying to keep pencils and paper from me. It's not easy, folks. You need to prepare for that. That's a really harsh reality. Because again, you're in a military consequence, and you have to really start to figure this out. Why I tell you, try not still be function, but do not jeopardize yourself. This is not the time to do so for lots of reasons. Probably never was, but in this case, what the assumed literally power of these entities is really something not to mess with. So here's another example for us. The Bundy thing points out this militarization. No one's being released that's deemed to be more than has a felony. They can actually do this down to a misdemeanor. I think that's out of the Patriot Act, P-A-T-R-I-O-T Act. That Cliven Bundy then enters into court, I think, in Nevada. Yeah, I guess they moved him down to Nevada. And he refuses to enter a plea to recognize. He refuses to enter plea or recognize U.S. authority in Nevada courtroom. Okay, so what I want to touch is not that he's done all that, but this is what I was talking to you about that you have to understand. You can't just go into the court and say you don't recognize their authority and not enter a plea. In other words, you can't not enter a plea and not recognize their authority. There's something that the occupiers will do for you. When he didn't enter a plea without having another word in his mouth, he showed himself to be incompetent. The court is then given just license to do justice for his benefit to enter plea. Because refusing to enter the plea without another statement does not actually address the presumption the court has authority. And you have to understand the reality of this. You have to understand what I've been saying all the time. When I read that, I go, okay, let's see what he did. And then he just refused, and then he went mute. Not moot, but mute. Mute, deaf and dumb. As soon as he refused to enter the plea and didn't offer what I've told you was a pre-plea remedy and avoidance, the court took it that he was incompetent and entered a plea for him for his benefit. Well, I was telling you last week, you just can't just deny. I'm telling you, agree that there's a power and address the power. As criminal as it is, in fact, that makes it easier. The jailed Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy refused Thursday to acknowledge federal authority and declined to enter a plea for federal charges that he led an armed standoff against a roundup of cattle 2 years ago. After several minutes of confusion about whether Bundy had a lawyer, United States Magistrate Judge Carl Hoffman entered a not guilty plea on Bundy's behalf and scheduled a detention hearing March 17th. The other problem I see there, without reading more, is apparently they went ahead and assigned him a lawyer, which proved he was incompetent. You can't walk into these courts without a word in your mouth in challenge, in opposition, direct opposition in law. He didn't what he ought to have said, and I can't put words in his mouth, and I can't say what he should do to make a silver bullet answer, but what at least he ought to have done was challenge the United States District Court as being not competent to hear and determine, the magistrate not competent to do what she was doing, and the court itself, the court before the status of USDC, is not competent to hear and take his plea that is not one for an Article 1, Article 4, or whatever legislative court they have, but only for an Article 3, and then only subject to the grantee-grantor relationship. You have to have your other reality. You have to deny the one that they're trying to foist on you. You can't be mute. They'll deem you mute and dumb. They'll give you an incompetent attorney who's not competent to represent your actual property rights. So I guess I'll say enough there. There's so much to go on and on and on. For all of y'all that want to look at videos and think they got the judge, he's telling the judge off and this and that. Oh, how did he enter a plea? Why did he? This is why you don't get it. Now, what I will tell you that most likely would have happened, they would say, we're not there for that. That's fine, because that's a due process violation that you can move on. Now you got to make a record. Now you're in the jaws. Now you're in the rendering machine. Now, but you got proof. You're in the jaws of organized crime. Okay, that's just the fact. But to walk in and be literally mute on a point in time that you waive your rights when you don't assert and say nothing else, the court has power to bring you in for your own protection. If you don't think this whole condition is heinous, this is another license they've given themselves to do harm to you under the appearance of doing good. Well, I'd say to you, you got to get the black and white in your eyes. You have to have a word in your mouth. You can't stand silent. The crickets get eaten. And I understand Vince easily says that chili crickets are his most favorite. So this is object lessons for us, folks. This thing here works about everywhere, even administratively. You have to know what your rights are and assert them. The lack of presentation of which they're waived. Most of those of which can never be brought up again, another license they've given to you. So now you've got it, now you've funneled down to even less. There's still some there. Jurisdiction can always be challenged, and repeatedly. But boy, there's not very much more after that. You better know your stuff. So, object lesson is what I was telling you. These people that stand on the Constitution and want to protect the Constitution may not be worthy to do that. They don't even understand what they're talking about. They don't understand that they're not in a court of competent jurisdiction. They're not understanding that they aren't before an officer that can do it. They have not agreed, even though the courts have given a magistrate judge the ability to do certain administrative things. That's not an administrative thing in a court without a court having competent jurisdiction and competent existence. Don't forget this. The judge has no place to sit if there's no court in lawful existence. Why do I know this? Well, besides reading, because I proved it in our filings in 2013. I got crickets from the judge. That was good. That's the good kind of, that's the chili crickets I enjoyed. So this is, again, you reinvert this whole thing into what it needs to be by not waiving those things that they said you were vigilant to have to keep. If you want the republic, you keep it, folks. You keep it at every point. And I just say your property rights is the republic. And outing the felony against you is the republic. Whether or not the occupier keeps you bound up, you've made a record now. It's not so easily destroyed. And other people can move with that. You know, if he did that and they didn't release him, thousands and thousands of habeases could be brought in on his behalf. What do you mean you're not going to allow him to challenge jurisdiction pre-plea? See, if he's at the plea and he says, I'm going to do rights prior to plea, and they enter a plea, they've just denied a whole raft of due process that was made sitting there for him to avoid the very thing that they violated in him. Now you got two problems. This is really not that hard to see. The point is that it's like a free-for-all then for the public to see, oh, wait a minute, on his behalf and because it affects me, I'm going to jump in on it with a habeas and I'm going to say, wait a minute, now you just denied. And now that he didn't, it's a little bit more difficult because he didn't even step up and defend his own self. So now your only option is to do a habeas on his behalf because he didn't know to do that, and the court was duty bound to identify that in him. And you put the burden back on the court, don't you? So a little bit technicals here, but this is what I see. I read, this is the stuff I think, this is what goes through my mind, and more, I mean, so much more. when I read these stories, I don't know what you're going to get out of it, and maybe you can compare what I get out of it with what you get out of it. And if there's if there's any disparagement, substantial disparagement between what I'm saying is there that needs to be done and whether or not you saw it, the stuff you didn't see, I'm suggesting you need to find the right information, and you need to have it in you. And this is how they're killing us. And if he knew this much, he would have known how to respond before. And my problem with this is I know that my colleague has gone down in the 2014 thing is to look at his paperwork to find out what he had, and he has a ton of power this court cannot destroy if he were to just bring it forth. And if they do destroy it, they make wars on the laws of the United States. They become the one that's in rebellion in the seat of decision. This, folks, is really, I see that this is not that hard to point out. It's kind of exciting in a way, but you just have to lay it out the way the law says it is. Embrace that part. Don't deny it. The power is limited, but they've made it up to you to limit it. So moving on now, speaking of power, and we're already through the whole broadcast, I hardly get any tabs. I did want to bring up some stuff in this March. Remember, we were back in March 11th of 2011, was Fukushima. I've been moving past that. I've been talking about Fukushima since then and all this, and it's just not happening, and it's provably now that it didn't happen, and Fukushima is no threat. But something came up, and it was about this Turkey Point, Biscayne Bay leaking, and I kind of dismissed it, and then something flashed in my mind the other day, and now I want to go through this, because something else happened way back in 2011. That caused me to know what I tell you, what is going on in the country, United States of America, that they're using Fukushima to cover up existing radiation harm. It's worse than Fukushima, folks. But here's the stories. We'll go through real quick because I don't have much more time. But the FPL, nuclear plant canals leaking into Biscayne Bay, study confirms, was our first notice. It's been going on for a couple weeks. Radioactive isotopes leaked to the water from power cooling canals has been found in high levels in Biscayne Bay, confirming suspicions that Turkey Point's aging canals are leaking into nearby national park. A whole story behind all that as well. But this got me looking. I go, where is Turkey Point? Well, it happens to be very near the bottom of Florida, the peninsula there. And I said, okay, well, that's not what's in my mind. What am I thinking here? So Turkey Point nuclear plant is pumping polluted water into Biscayne Bay was the news. It is the news. Where's Turkey Point? You get on Wiki. I just go down. It's a nuclear power plant down there at the bottom of the peninsula of Florida. But why was I starting focuses on this? Because what happened in 2011, what caused me to know beyond question that Fukushima was the scapegoat, wasn't even grown up yet into Fukushima. It was just a little scapegoat. Was that I remember, they were telling us within a short time, within a couple weeks, that Fukushima had attacked the Carolinas and Florida. Fukushima radiation plumes, you remember all those? Have now struck the Carolinas, and I found this wonderful thing on the internet to be able to collect up what my memory forgot. I happened to find this on one of the websites I've stopped kind of citing to unless I really have to. That was really showing that it like its affiliates are really fear-mongering a lot actually. That declared that Florida had a problem with Fukushima radiation. That I was thinking about with Biscayne Bay, with the Florida. Wait a minute now, how that's something else, isn't it? They're now finding a study shows it's been leaking. Well, I predicted that there would be a radiation leak because of my observations of the report that Florida, during the time of Fukushima was blamed for Florida radiation, that I had to revisit this. I said, based on my theory, to myself, I'm talking about this thing, I'm saying that report that caught my attention, that identified what this really is, contrary to most everybody else's boogeyman in Fukushima, this plumes that came over. The point that I am making requires that we should find evidence that the report that came out of the Florida on that year would show signs or would be near a nuclear source. Then I decided to go look. One of the first articles that pop up, Fukushima radiation in America's aquatic dust bowl. out of Brevard Times editorial, Brevard County. I didn't even at the time go look, so I'm coming 5 years later to find out the fact that I told you was going on back when. Several comparisons can be drawn between the American Dust Bowl in 1930s and a recent plight of the Indian River Lagoon on the Florida's east coast. Both ecological disasters followed boom and bust cycles. Economical cycles suffered overgrazing and natural grasses and had a perfect storm of meteorological bad luck combined with human causes. They're talking about this life cycle of this lagoon up in Brevard County. Well, they attribute Fukushima radiation as well as other chemical type processes that are going on. Happens to be near Cape Canaveral, which is partly why they were doing this study. And I was wondering, where is this Brevard County? Well, let me go back and do some checking about the weather I believe would be required to lift the radiation, if it's in Brevard County, up into the sky. As I told you, would have to have happened in Fukushima. That didn't happen. That says it would be impossible for that to reach here. How did it get all the way down to Florida when there was absolutely zero way to get there at all? Where would that, my theory, it's beyond theory now, where would that radiation come from but a nuclear source and the water being lifted from the bay? And don't you know, the same time we are looking at that time period, wind spread, wind damage from squall line, it speaks to the fact that there were water spouts. So I'm going, wow, water spouts picking up they're blaming Fukushima radiation. I'm saying that there's no natural source. What are the sources of radiation potential? Well, there's this one called St. Lucie. St. Lucie is a power plant that sits in Brevard County on the coast. And so I said, well, what's the ocean currents? Because that's the same analysis I did for Fukushima. And I have links for you to go to the Ocean Prediction Center that shows you currents for the Gulf Stream, which comes right up from the south, right around Turkey Point, and right up, and then goes and deflects off of that little nub sticking out of Florida, leaving the backside a little bit void. In other words, there's an eddy that can come in and go in there, although it's washed periodically by the vacillating stream side currents. It has an ability to concentrate in water right at that point. That you find out that St. Lucie nuclear power plant is right there. Predictably, folks. So what I was telling you back in 2011, that when I saw it happening in Florida, meant that actually the whole nation was being Fukushima was going to be used to hide the worst condition, that radiation is everywhere across this country. It's certainly near every point of nuclear power or any nuclear radiative material used. We find a nuclear power plant. I'm going to predict, just as they took years to have to have a study to find that these canals are linking, I think we're going to find that St. Lucie is probably leaking as well. And back in 2011, those water spouts fortuitously lifted that up so that we could see it was in the bay. Doesn't take much. And that would answer why and how radiation could go all the way down to where no air current could have ever brought Japan air, and why we found at that time what everybody else declared was Fukushima radiation. Even your top alternative news sites. But I've not been wanting to. I don't want to be against everybody. Not everybody, a lot of people. But I have to have been on this. I'm really trying to be honest about what we look at. And that, why I'm even talking about it, because that many years ago, and we just went through the 11th, was what caused me to see the proof if I had a doubt before, the proof that Fukushima was being used as a scapegoat to cover what the country of the United States, the agency of the United States, have allowed to be a harm in your life. I am not against nuclear power, properly done, but you see, almost as if in any socialized country, a socialism country, the degradation of the systems. only it's been cast over as a private operation. When you really look at the law, there's really nothing private in the necessities. It's all controlled. Especially in the wartime. Remember, folks, don't forget this. Don't forget this connection. It's always there. Title 50 is so prominent. So, I mean, I didn't know all these things. I didn't know that there was this squall line. I didn't know that there was these water spouts that literally were the energy I was telling you had to happen in Fukushima that didn't happen, was happening in Florida 2 weeks later to lift the particles that are concentrated in around St. Lucie nuclear reactor into the sky to be measured on the land in that county. Now, I guess I can just say, well, that's a interesting coincidence, isn't it? And I guess I'd be fair enough to leave it right there, but I'm telling you that my intuition and my observations up until then, and some knowledge about meteorology and some knowledge of other things, and all the things I used as I grew up thinking it was important to be knowledgeable about all these things, was telling me of a different story. That if I was a theory of which is perfected in all the conditions that would be necessary for radiation to be measured where it had never been before and could not be attributed to Fukushima. So I can't say it was just mere coincidence. I'm saying there's a dynamic. We're living in a radiation cesspool. And I say that because we are responsible to our own health. And this becomes another feature on the battlefield against us, Battlefield America. And this becomes another feature of understanding about why it's allowed to continue when everything becomes a necessity. Even you're harming you. And then you tie that into sustainable development and you understand the underpinnings of an economic global debt servitude with the management infrastructure for only so many people, in that you're looking at a population control system. You start realizing this is also the plan. And as long as you're told of this facade, eventually you'll just take it in stride. I'm saying you take it in stride, but you have to not only know that it's there, but work to stop this stuff. There's no reason for these canals to be, other than monetary, for these canals to be polluting anything. Now, there's lots of reasons. Again, what was it, Roosevelt that said nothing doesn't happen but not by plan. Okay, I'm telling you, they make plans, and if you don't have one, you lose. And this is this incremental poisoning of everybody, and the system that hides it, and the pharma, and the cancer, and whatever this thing is doing, is right there to see through Fukushima, as I predicted 5 years ago. And so enough on that. Go on to more show, folks. So it's the show. We're watching this ongoing movie, play, stage thing, whatever, and we have our part in it. Hackers claim John McCain knew is execution videos were staged. Was one important story that came up. We've heard about that. Then someone comes up and it said that they actually had video of the staged is execution videos. They're actually seeing the stage that they use. The green, apparently the video is kind of bad as far as the color saturation, so I can't see in the highest bright white lights, but I can see the green screen behind them. They have the video, folks. This is beyond conjecture. This is what the United States government and Israel and Saudis and Qatar, and I'm not playing music there, Qatar and Turkey, they're all playing this. They're playing us. And we have the video. News at 11, folks. I mean, okay, now, there we are. I mean, how much do we continue to remain silent on this, not to point it out? Speaking of Turkey point, speaking of Turkey being involved in all this nonsense, we have Turkey in the news and the EU bribe. 6.6 billion EU bribe to hold back refugees. Folks, this is it. You're seeing 2030 right here. They're utilizing the move out, the forced movement of the migration of the herd into EU to destroy it, to move it back. Turkey, take these people from us. We'll pay you money. Look at the economic motion going on here. Perfect. You're seeing how it works. Turkey did a move. You think it's kind of nuts. It's certainly against people. Well, but they don't care. This is about the movement of funds. It's about destruction of power structures. Turkey to receive 6.6 billion in EU bribe. Then that's okay. All of the European Union is going to say, here, do it, Turkey. Now, I don't understand why now Syria and Russia doesn't step up and say, we'll take the Syria. Now that we have better control of Syria, we're going to go take our citizens back. Because how they're going to do this is they're going to put all these people, whatever ones they can process, on military troop transport ships and move them back across the Mediterranean and back into Turkey. Well, Syria is right next door on the coast. That Syria and Russia should do the same thing for their own people and put themselves up to show up what EU is not going to do. But that points out what the Agenda 2030 was meant to do and doing. And what's it doing it on? This fiscal nonsense, this puff and smoke. It's really this puff and dust. It's a former Fed president. We injected cocaine and heroin into the system to create a wealth effect. I think he means that in all ways, literally and figuratively. Former Fed President Dick Fisher, these names, folks, admitted the Fed front-loaded an enormous market rally in order to create a wealth effect. Today he's back taking a victory lap on the 7th anniversary of the crisis lows for explaining rather stunningly to CNBC that, quote, we injected cocaine and heroin into the system to enable a wealth effect. Now we are maintaining it with Ritalin. The Fed is a giant weapon that has no ammunition left. Take heed, folks. But this is it. Puff and smoke, digital currency digital money going to Turkey. It's a big shuck and jive, and we can buy into it if we want. People are being harmed terribly over this. A20, if you didn't think global order is in play, you're seeing all of this right here. The fix is in. Heroin fix, folks. They're telling us. They injected cocaine. Yes, I know it means it's an example. I think it's literal as well as they're telling you they're just a bunch of drug dealers in fiscal policy and monetary policy as well. And it does harm. Mass unemployment waves beginning in China from now on, going into years. Pink slips going to millions of workers. China don't care. They're in on it. This is not something that you can play with. You have to be independent of it. You have to call it out. You have to not agree. You can't participate where you shouldn't. You have to voice your objection, not just deny a power that controls you. This requires action, engagement. Again, behind the woodshed, I try to bring all my my insight to show you the imperative and really what you can do, even though it's a little bit short. I don't have a lot of development, and I can't. It's too technical, too much actually to say. But it's there, folks. It's right here to see. We get to respond to it. The book is open anymore. There's no excuse. It really is shame on us. Shame on us for not really responding or making excuses to not respond. Or not feeling that we're not ready enough. Folks, it's not that hard. I keep telling you the simple answers. It's not that hard. It really, and I'm here if you have a question. I have been. To all y'all that are still and are researching and learning more, not denouncing that at all, not a judgment. Is that you do have to make the transition. Time is now. Time is now. I haven't said that in a long time. Time is now. So thank you very much for tuning in today. Appreciate it. And again, the WT people can go over to, darn it, I just don't have it in my mind. It was freedomsnetwork.com for the time being. And we can move on. We may have a couple more people coming on, and we're in TalkStream Live now as a directory. You can direct people to there. And you have UCY, again, as always, with their fine schedule of information. And hopefully we can start being unified as we do this and come together and stop being divisional against ourselves. And really start, if a tool isn't something, that what I'm having to say isn't something, Maybe you can find your own that becomes effective, and then you can maybe get your own broadcast and tell us what that is. I mean, I certainly would like to help to see where there's other options. So take care, and I'll see you. Technical difficulties willing, and in nature, I'll be here. Bye.